I was a so-called splitter back when I was applying to law school, meaning I had a high LSAT score and a low GPA. I recently got a question asking about my undergraduate GPA, and I honestly wouldn't mind sharing it if I could remember it. I think it was around a 3.3, but my question really is, why does my GPA matter, and why does your GPA matter? No matter what your GPA is, the answer's always going to be the same. Get a higher LSAT score. The LSAT is the biggest factor in the law school admission process. And if you're looking into law school, graduating from undergrad soon, if you haven't already graduated, in which case your GPA is fairly fixed at this point in time. This student was also asking me about retaking classes from undergrad in order to boost the undergrad GPA. For those who aren't aware, there is a loophole when it comes to undergraduate GPA. If you retake a class, the new grade can replace the old grade. But the thing is that there are roughly 8 semesters in the average undergraduate experience. You have 4 years times 2 semesters per year on average. At least that's the standard from when I went to college. And the thing is that each semester, you're probably taking on average 4 or 5 classes. So one class from one semester is going to be something like 1/40th or 2.5% of your undergrad GPA. So even if you raise that from a C to an A or even a D to an A if you could, that's going to have a very marginal impact. Is it going to raise you from what, a 3.0 to a 3.05? I don't know the math on this, but bottom line, it's not going to be that significant. My question is, why are you focusing on GPA? I understand you're worried about law school admissions, you're worried about maximizing your odds, and you're worried that your GPA might not be what you would like it to be. But the thing is, no matter what, the LSAT is going to be the biggest factor in the admissions process in virtually every single case. There are over 100 ABA approved law schools, and most of them have released their law school admissions index, which is the formula for how they weigh LSAT score relative to GPA. And I looked through all the published law school admissions indices, which is the plural of index. I didn't know that until I looked into this. And the thing is that only 3 of them out of over 100 weighed GPA more heavily. I think Berkeley was one of the only ones that were noteworthy that weighed GPA more heavily. Virtually every other law school weighed LSAT more heavily. The extent to which they weigh LSAT more than GPA varies, of course. Bottom line, LSAT is the bigger factor, and it makes sense why. It's because humanities GPAs are so inflated as to be practically worthless when it comes to evaluating your academic ability. And law schools aren't going to look into different every single major at every single college or university in the country. There are literally thousands of colleges and universities, and there are hundreds and hundreds of majors. And so with different professors, some believe grades are meaningless. Like one of mine in undergrad, he said grades were meaningless, so he just gave all of us an A, which of course we loved. But the thing is, some professors do that, some don't. Obviously, it's going to be easier on average to get an A in, say, English than to get an A in engineering. And so for this reason, law schools weigh LSAT scores more heavily than undergraduate GPA. This is unfortunate. Maybe it's not fair. I could see the argument for that. But the thing is, because GPAs vary so much, law schools tend to place more weight and importance on the LSAT. The bad news is that the LSAT matters more than your GPA, but the good news is that also that your LSAT matters more than your GPA. Because the thing is, no matter what your GPA, no matter what your background, no matter what your resume or your work experience, you can still boost your odds of getting into law school significantly no matter where you are at in the journey. All you've got to do is put in, say, 3 months, maybe 6 months if you can, into studying for the LSAT, and you can radically alter your odds of getting into a top law school. Even if your GPA is a 3.0, if you can get a 175 on the LSAT, you can go to law school for free. There are tons of law schools that will give you a full ride, maybe even a stipend on top of that, meaning that you could get paid to go to law school if you get a top LSAT score. Why will law schools do this? It's because if you get an LSAT score above their median, and the higher above the median, the better, you will raise their status in the ever important US News law school rankings. Law schools are evaluated based on the highest LSAT scores and GPAs of their matriculating applicants. And while your GPA might be relatively fixed in time at this point, you can still make a massive impact just by getting a higher LSAT score. The LSAT is offered nearly every single month. Coming up later this year, it's going to be offered in 4 consecutive months: August, September, October, and November. You could take any of those 4 and apply to law school early this cycle, You could even take it in January or February. And so even if your diagnostic on the LSAT is a 140 or a 130, doesn't matter. You put in a good 3 to 6 months, you bump up your score 20, 30, 40 points. And I know that might seem like a lot, but believe me, it is possible. We see it happen all the time at LSAT Unplugged. And if you'd like our help, by the way, of course, you can check out the links below the video to find out more and to book a call with me, my team. We'd be glad to help you out on the journey to 170 plus. And so if you study for the LSAT for a good 3 to 6 months, you put in the time, you learn the different sections, you learn the different question types, you take a bunch of practice tests, you boost up your score, you put in some work on your application essays, and you apply, your GPA will not matter that much. That's the awesome thing. You'll have your letters of recommendation, you'll have your resume, you'll have your application essays, and of course, most importantly, you'll have that LSAT score. And law schools love splitters. If you have a high GPA and a low LSAT, that's okay too. If you have a high LSAT and low GPA, even better, because LSAT weighs more heavily. That's the awesome news. Even if you goofed off in college, even if you had competing obligations that led you to not put as much work into your undergrad classes as you would have liked, it's okay. Law schools will understand. You can write an addendum to explain away whatever happened in undergrad. And of course, going forward, you can get that top LSAT score. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.